Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
And welcome back, everybody. We're going to talk about coaching, moving your life forward, but we're going to look at it through a different lens, and that's through the lens of somebody who is younger on a journey. But interestingly, the coach and that person are related. It's going to be interesting today. Margaret Enloe, who is a fantastic coach, president and founder of Moving You Forward, joins us once again. Hey, Margaret, how you doing?
Hi, Steve. Nice to see you.
You too. A little bit different today. You brought along your daughter, Laura McIntyre. Laura, welcome. How are you?
Hi there. Thanks for having me. Nice to meet you, Steve.
You too. Good to have you both here today. So definitely our generation, Margaret, different than it is for somebody younger in terms of charting their journey, figuring it all out. I'm going to ask you, Laura, right out of the gate, what are you doing? And what is your true goal right now?
Thanks, Steve. What I'm doing right now is twofold, I'd say. I work as a creative project manager for a textile company that's headquartered in Lower Manhattan. It's called Design Tex. When I say textiles, I mean upholsteries, wall coverings, materials for the built environment as opposed to clothing. So if you've ever been in a bank, a hospital, a hotel, a stadium, a church, those are places that we outfit with textiles that the company I work for produces. Right. Working for them as a creative project manager means that I'm typically tapped into projects with our design team, our marketing team, product development, so more internally facing as opposed to externally facing with sales, to take concepts or some abstract notion, maybe it's a story that we're trying to communicate, and changing that into tangible, actionable items. So the project management side of it brings a lot of planning, forecasting issues that we might run into, making sure that all relevant team members and groups are, tracking towards the same goals, et cetera. That's what I do professionally right now. And the reason I say twofold is because my other kind of experience right now is a grad program that's looking at entrepreneurialism and management within the arts and cultural sector through an art school that's based in London called Central St. Martin's. So that's kind of what I'm up to these days. And my goal really, to answer the second part of your question, is to apply project management skills that I've been honing for the past 10 years more directly to the fine arts. That kind of is where the grad program comes in.
Interesting how you're using those skills now, but you're also connected to the arts. You're in a creative realm right now, but with the arts, and it's almost as if you have your laser on that and using that current experience. So I have to ask, Margaret, as a coach, life coach, have you worked with your daughter?
I have not in any formal way worked with my daughter. When I have an engagement with a client, often there's a contract. I can never had that kind of engagement with Laura. Whatever coaching I've done, it's been very, very informal. Pretty much mother gets asked various things along the way. So in that capacity, Laura, you could answer better whether I've coached you or not. Hopefully I've been a mentor at some level, but coaching is a little different.
Yeah, there's definitely some overlap, I think, in what the coach offers to a client and what the mother offers to a child. Mom and I have many conversations about, professional trajectory, emotional intelligence, these things that have never been discussed through any contractual relationship. But I do feel I benefit from my mom's, of course, advice and her working history as a coach. It does kind of seep naturally into our mother-daughter relationship. The cool thing is that my mom has worked with several of my friends, people facing career opportunities or changes, the younger generation facing some of these newer hurdles, a changing professional landscape. Mom's been able to help them with their unique circumstances, although she and I have not worked together.
What are you feeling? What are you hearing, Laura, among your peers, people around your age, working, trying to figure it out. I'm trying to get that perspective from like when I was, in my 20s.
Yeah, I mean, of course, there are themes that would apply to anyone, whether it was, several decades ago getting into the workforce versus now. Um, I think something that's specific to my generation and my peers right now is trying to balance um, activities and opportunities for work that are genuinely meaningful and that align with, let's say, a passion, while also acknowledging that one's job won't necessarily check all of those buckets. I think maybe the baby boomers and previous generations, there wasn't as much emphasis placed on finding something that's super enjoyable to you, find your passion in your work. Whereas I think for us, we've grown up with this notion that that is indeed possible. But passion can conflict at times with the bottom line, one's reality, and what they're trying to accomplish, let's say financially. And so I think there's a constant mediation for folks coming out of college of how much effort to put into one side versus the other.
It's a stark difference. And Margaret, please weigh in on this one. But, that older generation, if you will, it was all about work hard, work hard, work hard. Doesn't mean you love your job, just work hard, work hard. The quality of life was there, but sometimes it wasn't. There wasn't sometimes the best balance. But it seems like a younger generation, it's more about the quality of life, where it's got to support you, serve you. There's got to be a good balance. Thoughts, Margaret?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And the distinction from, let's say, Steve, your generation, my generation, in terms of wanting to support your life, make money, get into a career. And there were fewer options also when we were growing up. We didn't have the internet to go explore the vast variety of things that are now available to Laura's generation. And I think the lack of choice that we had in some ways made it easier. You're going to be a banker, you're going to be a lawyer, you're going to be a scientist, an engineer, those kinds of things, a nurse, there are many other things, teacher. For Laura's generation, what I found is that people come to me and sometimes they know generally what they want to do or field in which they want to be and grow, but very often they don't have an idea. They have no idea. And so it's harder. Choice, there are books written about having choice. The Paradox of Choice is one of those books. And it talks about how if you give people 5 choices, let's say of jams to buy, they are much more likely to buy one of those jams. If you give them 30 varieties of jams, all of them good, same quality, they probably are less likely to buy a jam from you. So the more choice you have, the more confusing it can be. So yes, in my coaching, when I do work with people in Laura's generation, let's say, and that can be a pretty big swath of ages, that it's harder to pin down, yeah, this is what I want. And this interest in having a good quality of life factors in more than it did for you and me.
Thank you for sharing that. And I try to take myself back. I knew what I wanted to do when I was 9 years old. I'm doing it.
Wow. Oh, great.
Haven't stopped. I got my first job, like literally on the air, had the paycheck, and was full-time at 17. And even before that, I wanted to be a cartoonist. So while got a job in radio, I was still drawing cartoons. I almost became syndicated as a cartoonist and then pivoted off into the radio broadcast direction. So it's hard for me to really see, somebody doesn't know what they want to do. I understand it, but I can't totally relate to it, because for me, it was just like, this is what I want, and that's what's going to happen. Got lucky. I'm going to say I did. And thanks to my mom for driving me to my first job, because I don't have a driver's license. So,
Steve, just out of curiosity, what was it about radio that appealed to you so much as a young person?
It's a really good question. There was a certain magic. I can't even explain it. And later in life, it was being able to connect and touch people through the medium. But also, I think that a part of me, it was I could hide behind the microphone because I got bullied as a kid and had, a little bit of challenges as growing up, where it's like, well, nobody knows who I am. You can just, talk through this thing and you hear and it's all good there. But getting a reaction from people, because when I would draw cartoons, I loved people say, "Oh yeah, I love that. It's really funny. The character is good." Blah blah. So same thing with the medium. And to pivot even further, I stayed at one radio station for 26 years. That's the one I pretty much started at. The first one was 6 months, and then the other one was 26 years. And when I left, I was like, I'm going to get a job that's going to help people. I looked in hospitals, director of external affairs, and something that was more connected to helping people, making a difference. And then somebody said to me, "Do you realize that's what you're doing anyway?" And I was like, I didn't pick up on that. And then I went back into radio, and then I stayed, and I'm still doing it. I won't even tell you how many years, but still doing it, but then pivoted off to podcasts and I have a marketing company too. So that's where I get to use the creative side, that came from the cartooning. So I find it when I talk to anybody that's not sure what they want to do, it's like, I want to help them because I felt it, I got into what I wanted to do. But I guess it can be a real challenge where you have this in you and it's not being matched by what you're doing. Totally. Right.
And also the factor that things are changing even at a more rapid pace. When we were looking for jobs, we knew there were going to be certain jobs available 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. They were going to still be there. Now, right. Laura, you're probably experiencing this, that jobs that are available now, there's a good possibility they won't be around 5 years, even 10 or 10 years from now. So you got to be a little more flexible, I think, now than before.
And adaptable, I think, is such a key word for my generation's experience of the workforce. And, another thing I was going to bring to the table that's kind of a generational difference maybe is what we call portfolio careers. Someone not working for one company for their entire working life, but instead kind of working on behalf of many different clients, whether as a freelancer, a contractor, this kind of amalgam of different roles, which might afford greater flexibility, freedom, agency, but also requires the constant involvement of seeking new clients or new contractual relationships.
Sure.
So in a way, I think the portfolio career model speaks to my generation's interest in greater agency in their professional life, more control over their work-life balance, but it also does come with kind of the additional legwork to sustain many different working relationships as opposed to one.
It's interesting when you look at it that way, because in an older generation, it was you had the job, you went to work every day, rinse and repeat, 26 years go by, you just keep doing your thing, which is all good. But some people can get burned out doing that, where what you're suggesting in the portfolio situation, it's always keeping it fresh. There's all more going on, but there's more of a challenge in keeping that going. It's almost like a juggler, keeping the balls up in the air. You always, working on it, where if it's the one job you go to, but one thing to be said here, there's no loyalty. So, somebody, and I left on my own, but you could be gone tomorrow, in today's job market, and whether you're there for 5 years, 10, whatever it might be. So I really envy looking at, what you're talking about, Laura, where it sounds like you can pivot, you can move around, where back in the day I don't want to say got stuck into a job, but you centered into a job and that was your life, right?
Yeah. And there was certainly an expectation that you would stay in that job.
Yes. Yes.
It's interesting to see, because as you know, I was a lawyer for over 30 years, practicing lawyer.
Sure.
And at that time, or early in that time of career, partners at law firms did not switch law firms. There was a lot of loyalty to your law firm. And after I had left Skadden Arps, where I had my private practice for a while, I was not a partner there, but I noticed just from seeing the loyalty shifted. And partners were coming and going and coming and going, and it's still that way. It's a little bit more money. Where's the money? Where the clients and driven that way than it used to be by far.
Yeah, I just got a thought too. Back then, when somebody was changing jobs a lot, it was like, look at Mike, can't hold a job down. He's like, I got another one. He's on to another one. Now it's like, it's a badge of courage. Hey, got another one. And it's a good one. And it makes you feel good and supports what you want to be doing. They're very different. But Laura, what's your advice coming from your view of things to somebody that is trying to figure out their path and their purpose?
I almost feel like I'm now at an age where I can answer that question, whereas very recently I was the one asking it. I have enough life experience to have some commentary on that. I almost hate to say something so common, but the idea that variety of experience, whether that's in your personal life, through internships, whatnot, that does create kind of a sifting of options that can inform what works best for each individual. In a way, I liken it to relationships. If you have many different relationships, both romantic and platonic, with your family, friends, partners, by nature of those experiences, you start to distill which qualities in your friendships and relationships work best for you. What is a best match? And I think it's the same dynamic when seeking a professional match. The wider your net of experience, the more informed you can be about what really works for you. For example, I started working full-time with design techs, where I still currently work. But at some juncture, I realized that my value system was much more in line with having a more freedom and flexibility to control my schedule, to say when I was going on vacation, et cetera. And it was only from working previous jobs where I had that flexibility that I could say, actually, what I think would work best for me is to switch from being a full-time employee to a contracted employee. A lot of people wouldn't necessarily decide to do that switch, But for me, again, to kind of live more in line with my values, that worked out really well for me. And I think I would have only known that that was an option based on kind of the net of experiences that I had cast previously in my life.
Thank you for sharing that, because that really puts perspective on it. You're not going to know until you know. And unless you're involved with different positions, people, whatever it might be, that's how you learn what's important for you. And it also builds your confidence as well. Because more people you meet, the more situations come up, maybe challenges that you have to navigate through, keeping everybody happy or not, you as well. So yeah, I mean, I think that's a game changer there, because you know better what you want, what feels good for you, what your purpose is. Like as you said before, that you look at Central Street Martin. Am I saying that right?
Central St. Martin's.
St. Martin in London, as that's on your radar, and that's kind of a direction you want to head in, but approaching it from this direction over here. So you got to make it all work, but you know what you want. At least a solid direction based on doing a lot of different things.
Right.
I would add to that your generation, Laura, and in part other older people too, have had the advantage, and some might say the disadvantage, of living through the pandemic. And I wonder how much more flexibility, opportunity for experimentation, of doing things virtually, remotely, has crept into our system in a big way because of the pandemic, and has allowed people to experiment, try many more things than they would have otherwise. I don't want to put too much of a rosy gloss on the pandemic, because it made it very, very hard for many people, but it did allow for some level of experimentation. and ability to communicate with people around the world that we really didn't have part of our everyday lives before.
Yep, 100%. And millennials, Generation Z, I believe the COVID situation just sped it up or perpetuated it, because that was already happening, but it didn't have the stamp of approval like you have now. I mean, look at back, like, 2010, 11, company known as Google. They had cafes, pinball machines, childcare, a gym. Whoa. Thank you, younger generation, for setting that in motion. And then that sort of woke people up thinking, we need a quality of life. We're not all slaving away. There's got to be something more to it. And I believe the COVID was just one more step in that, in allowing telecommunicating and just different relationships and different modes of operation and work. So I believe it was there, but that was like the pond. That was the rock in the pond that the ripples went out and kind of sped the whole thing up there. Margaret, your thoughts on anybody of any age trying to find their purpose? Like, we're kind of centering on that today. What makes you feel complete?
I would say it's interesting talking about purpose. And I know we've mentioned that a few times. I think it's hard for many people to figure out their purpose. And it comes a lot from doing the kinds of things that Laura was talking about. You don't know necessarily what your purpose is until you've been doing things for a while. You, Steve, talk about, hey, I like radio. And in doing that, over time, you realize, I like helping people. And then somebody says to you, Steve, you're already doing that. You couldn't have known as a 17-year-old or maybe even a 30-year-old, my purpose is to help people. So
No.
I just qualified a little bit saying that if somebody says to me, I don't know what my purpose is in life, I said, you can join the 50 million people in the world who don't know what their purpose is, but I would encourage you to go experiment on some things. I mean, I might not say it like that to them, but experiment with various things and see what grabs your attention, what energizes you, what makes you smile, what makes you feel pretty good when you wake up in the morning. And through that process, your purpose may emerge. I think of my purpose, Steve, as I want to continue to learn things. And that's a pretty broad purpose, but it fits with who I am now, with my age, with what I've done in the past. I want to just continue to keep learning instead of just saying, life's been cool. I think I'll just go take a walk. That's not quite enough. So back to your question, I don't want people feeling if I don't have a purpose, I'm totally messed up. There are ways of dealing with that issue that could be sidestepping that question.
And it may be you're volunteering over here. You have your job. It's okay. You're volunteering. That could be your purpose. It doesn't have to be your source of income.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Totally correct.
Great talking with both of you today. Interesting slice between generations, and certainly the mother-daughter dynamic. Margaret, how do we find you?
You find me, Steve, easy to find me on LinkedIn under my name, Margaret Enloe, Enloe. And then my email is also pretty easy, ME, my initials, at margaretenloe.com. I do have a website, and people can look up margaretenloe.com and contact me through my website as well.
Laura, your mom is super cool. She really is.
Agree. It's lucky I can say that. She's a great coach. She's a great mom. I'm very lucky.
Yeah. She's doesn't matter age, finger on the button of what we're thinking about and how we want to move our lives forward. And appreciate that. Thank you both for being here today. Really, really was a great talk.
Thank you, Steve. Nice to
Thanks.
meet you. Nice to meet you today.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
We'll be right back.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, I mean, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.